Ryan is a useless hero who was betrayed by his teammates who considered him weak. However, everything changes when he tames super powerful beast girls to get revenge, but discovers they'll do anything to please him as well. It all begins with Ryan being suddenly fired by his group's leader. After taking a moment to recall how he helped the team with his beast taming skills, he asks if they're joking. But upon realizing Arios is actually serious, he questions why. A magic user, Lin, then calls him the most useless human garbage they've ever seen. After everyone takes turns talking about how they always had to save him on missions, Ares tells him to drop his equipment since it was too broken to pay for anything good. Minutes later, he finds a bench to sit on and realizes that every time they were harsh on missions, it was because they always hated him. Then, 3 of his fans appear and beg to see his ability. So he quickly tames a bird and makes it greet them before releasing it from his contract. He explains how he forms contracts with animals, but their underdeveloped brains struggle to process the information. So they skip the tutorial to say everyone wants to become beast tamers in the future. This surprises him since everyone usually wants to be hero. But then they explain that Arios and the others in his group always look down on common people and only respect those with money. After they say being an adventurer is much better, Rin stops to think and realizes that being independent and free to earn money with his skills is right for him. Shortly after, he arrives at the Adventurers Guild, where a receptionist named Natalie greets him and offers to explain the test he must pass to become one. However, when he asks for a detailed explanation of what an adventurer is, she's surprised and says people focus more on how much money they can earn than what the job really is. She then explains the adventurer ranking system, as well as the jobs he can take on at each level, before saying he has to kill 10 goblins and collect 20 special herbs to officially become one. Later that day, he locates a group of goblins and easily slaughters them. But after collecting the crystals, he hears screams from inside the forest and runs to see a rank tiger about to devour an innocent-looking girl. Despite knowing there's nothing he can do, he attacks the tiger with a butter knife and acts surprised when it breaks like a twig. As the tiger decides to eat him, he tells the girl to run, but she suddenly channels what little energy she has left into a powerful jump and shatters the tiger's spine with a kick. After observing her closely, Rin realizes he's just come into contact with a cat spirit, which happens to be the rarest of all supreme species. The next moment, the tiger turns to fairy dust. Then he runs to catch Kanade, who then begins begging for food. Moments later, she finishes her snacks and says she was about to go see her grandparents in heaven because she hadn't eaten in days. After a proper introduction, he asks why she's starving in a random forest. Then she explains how she decided to leave her isolated village to experience life. A few minutes after that, he gives all the details of the verbal abuse he suffered at the hands of his former group, and she suddenly gets upset about the unfair way he was treated. This surprises him. Then he tells her not to bother feeling bad because he's the one who was too weak to keep up with them. When Kanade claims he's actually very powerful, he's even more surprised. Then she explains she felt some of his power when they met before telling him to try taming her. He initially thinks there's no way to tame a supreme species, but after deciding he at least wants to spend more time with her, he initiates the ritual and actually manages to perform it. She then tries to run off with him, but he stops to complete his adventure test and creates contracts with a group of rabbits before sending them to do all the work for him. This shocks her, and when she says common beast tamers can only handle one animal at a time, he states there's nothing special about his ability. Back at the guild, several minutes later, Nadal examines all the items he gathered to ensure they're legitimate before making him an official adventurer and handing over his ID card. After also giving him some coins for completing the test, she admits it may be a bit little, but promises he'll be accumulating money in no time as long as he keeps honing his ability. Despite her motivational speech, Rin gets worried upon realizing it'll take much more than good vibes to build a good life as an adventurer. Then he approaches Kanade and asks if she's willing to start accepting jobs. As soon as she says yes, the human version of Esker appears and asks why a cat spirit is hanging out with such a pathetic weakling. After she calls him stupid for not realizing Rin is actually a really powerful beast tamer, he decides to challenge Rin to an arm wrestle and says he'll take Kanade after winning. Instead of making a cliché speech about how women aren't property to be fought over, Rin decides to give the people what they want and sits down for the match. The next moment, he crushes the scarred idiot's hand on the table and struggles to understand how he got so strong while the wannabe bandit writhes in pain. After Natalie explains they were considering revoking his license, she asks Serene how the hell he contacted a cat spirit. Then both cling together in fear that she's about to punish them. However, after saying he'll certainly get stronger in the coming months, she wishes them luck and drags Scarface out of the building. Seeing Ryan still confused about the sudden increase in his strength level, Kanade explains that establishing the contract gave him access to all her abilities. She then gets excited for the next mission until they start sifting through weeds to find another batch of medicinal herbs. When she asks why he's not accepting high high-level missions, he reminds her he just received his license and is still just an unranked adventurer. As soon as she decides to do her best, regardless of how boring the job is, he tames another group of rabbits to gather everything they need, and she gets upset about how useless she's been since he tamed her. After telling her not to worry, he suggests returning to the guild to find another job, but she suddenly hears some commotion in the distance and tells him someone is in danger. Moments later, they arrive at the scene and observe an old man being threatened by a large group of bandits. When Kana says they should look for help, Rin tells her it'll be too late when they return. As soon as she realizes what he plans to do, both attack and take down the entire group in less than a minute. They then ask the old man why he was traveling without escort, and after saying they all fled when the bandits first appeared, he tells Ring they have to get as far away as possible, because no one has ever faced their group and lived to tell the tale. Hearing this, Rin stops to think of a rational solution and decides the best move will be to capture every member of the group. As he leaves to start the plan, Kanade remembers there are at least 100 bandits he'd have to face. R states it won't be a problem because he has the perfect plan to take care of them. Outside their hideout, a few minutes later, he introduces her to a species of highly venomous bees and says he'll tame a bunch of them to knock out all the henchmen until she returns with reinforcements. He then tells her to get as many adventurers as she can, as well as the Order of Knights. And after she runs off, he summons his army of bees to begin. Meanwhile, Lien and Mina, who turn out to be the escorts the old man hired, have just stopped running and pause to catch their breath before Mina grabs a high-level beast tamer they hired to ask why he didn't serve as a human shield. After he tells them beast tamers don't get involved in combat missions, Mina asks why he only tamed one squirrel when there are dozens running around, but he suddenly gets shocked and asks how they can expect him to do the impossible. As he explains how common beast tamers can only handle one animal at a time, Rin easily commands his army of bees to sting all the bandits in the hideout until they pass out. Lien then threatens the beast tamer to take the blame for their epic failure. And after he flees, Mina states there's no way Rin could be really powerful just because he could tame multiple animals. Several minutes later, Kanade returns with a group of adventurers from the guild who then tell Rin the Order of Knights refused to help. With their help, they tie up all the bandits. But as soon as he and Kanade start celebrating their victory, they hear a loud roar before 3 king lizards emerge from their cage and begin attacking everyone in sight. After Rin tells the adventurers to wait outside, they and Kanade face the Hanksay beasts in an epic royal battle that extends until the end of the night. At one point, the adventurers start worrying they might not make it out alive, but when both emerge with crystals obtained from the defeated lizards, the adventurers surround them to celebrate, making Rin realize he's come a long way since being the weakling Arios fired. At the guild later, Natalie presents him with a fat bag of coins as a reward for the capture before promoting him to rank and for all his efforts. He then takes Kanade to buy new equipment and makes a stop at the town restaurant to enjoy the best dinner money can buy. However, when they finally find a hotel to spend the night, happiness fades after he discovers they'll have to share a room. While Kanade immediately jumps on the bed and expresses how excited she is to finally sleep indoors, he decides to go sleep outside, but she stops him from leaving and says she doesn't mind spending the night with him. Hearing this, Rin tells her to stop trusting him so easily, because his little friend might make him do unholy things in the night, but she still insists it won't be a problem and says he's too nice to do something like that. He then decides to give her a quick lesson about how men can be dangerous so she can understand why Jan's girls prefer to be alone with bears. Despite this, she still refuses to let him sleep outside and explains how he's the only guy who made her feel safe after she left her village. Then he agrees to share the room. More than a week later, both complete a common mission, but when they return to the guild to receive payment, Nadal tells them about a guard dog that's been attacking anyone who tries to cross the central bridge. After she explains how all the victims end up needing hospital care, Kanade begs Rin to accept the mission, but he tells her to forget it because such a mission will probably be left for high-rank adventurers. At that moment, Natalie explains it's actually an open mission for anyone interested, but Rin still remains skeptical until she tells him the reward is 5 gold coins. Shortly after, he and Kanade arrive at the bridge, and after marveling at how big it is, she asks if he has any idea who or what the guard dog is. After he reminds her all the victims were too scared to talk for some reason, both see a dragon in the sky and almost faint from shock. However, after landing on the bridge, Tanya changes to her human form and introduces herself as one of the supreme species called dragonoids before challenging them to a duel. Rin then asks if she's the guard dog sending people to Isu, and when she says it's all part of her training, Kanade explains that dragonoids leave their hometown to begin a long training period as soon as they reach a certain level. This makes Rin start doubting his decision to accept the mission, but Kanadeo reminds him she's also one of the supreme species, so he regains his confidence and accepts Tanya's challenge. The next moment she advances to attack him, and although he manages to block, he quickly realizes why no one else could defeat her. After praising him for being strong enough to survive her weakest attack, she pushes him back and decides to get serious. As soon as they see the blast forming in her mouth, they jump back to dodge, but Kanade still ends up with her tail burned. This makes her angry, so she advances to deliver a barrage of blows, while Rin accepts he's too weak to take her down alone. He then decides to join Kanade, but Tanya easily blocks both attacks before grabbing them by the leg and throwing them as high as she can. The next moment, they see her preparing another blast, but this one turns out to be much more powerful than the first and almost turns them into barbecue wings. However, when the smoke dissipates, Tanya sees they managed to dodge at the last moment and praises their ability before saying no one has ever lasted this long against her. Rin then decides to stop using only Kanade's abilities and tells her to buy time before running off. So she decides to intensify things and attacks Tanya with a powerful punch that almost opens a hole in the bridge. Tanya manages to dodge, but Kanade immediately bathes her in another barrage of punches, while Rin climbs one of the bridge towers to make a contract with a special species of birds. Moments later, Kanade runs out of combinations to use on Intania, but Kin finally returns and sends his birds to peck every exposed part of her body. After shooing them away, she calls him stupid for thinking such an attack could leave a scratch on her. But after her entire body suddenly goes numb, he explains they're actually a species of highly toxic birds, and that's why he needed a bunch of them just to paralyze a dragon. When she suddenly admits defeat, they're surprised. Then she asks if there's anything else she can do when her entire body has just been shut down. After Kanade jumps on Ruin to celebrate, he makes Tanya agree to take her training elsewhere before they return to the guild to give Natalie the good news. As usual, she starts gloating him more than Taylor Swift fans and promises to get his coins as soon as they verify he really took down the feared guard dog. The next moment, Tanoda to Tanya and tries to ask if she's a dragonoid, but he quickly intercepts and claims she's a random NPC in costume. On the way out, he then tries to explain how dangerous it would be if everyone knew who she was. But then they see her fighting with the random knight and displaying her tail to the locals. In an open field, a few minutes later, Rin explains PX the importance of keeping her identity secret and suggests going to a different place so she can continue her training without getting into trouble. When Kanade asks why all her victims didn't want to say anything, she reminds them no one likes being beaten up by a villain and suddenly asks if she can join their group. Both are surprised by the sudden request. Then she explains that going on missions with him will serve as perfect training before grabbing Rin and admitting she likes him. Kanade immediately gets jealous and tries to stop her, but after Rin says it's fine with him, she reluctantly accepts. GRE then contacts Tanya, and after he completes the ritual, Kanade explains what the sign on her hand means, and she happily decides to address him as her master. Hours later, Arios and his group of weaklings return from another failed mission and begin to realize Rin wasn't as useless as they made him seem. Arios then decides to bring him back so they can use him only until they complete a special mission that's coming up. Days later, Rin and the girls set out on a new mission to hunt a swarm of slimes, and after several minutes searching in the forest, Kanade starts complaining. Then Tanya asks if she's afraid of them. After she explains how their soft bodies always stuck to her whenever she encountered them, Tanya states it wouldn't be a problem for her since she can simply roast them from a distance. Rin then remembers they have to find the slimes first before suddenly deciding to try searching from the sky. Both are confused and wonder how he plans to do this until he releases a special ability on a random bird and passes out. They immediately try to wake him and worry he might have killed himself until he starts talking from the bird's body and explains he just transferred his consciousness to it. After telling them to take care of his body, he takes off and finally locates the slimes. Moments later, Kanade picks up a rock to smash them, but Tanny stops her and asks Ruin if he's ever created a fireball. He then remembers trying once several years ago and says he was always weak in elemental magic, but she tells him to try attacking the slimes with it. When a single blast almost opens a crater in the forest floor, he's confused and wonders how he got strong. Then Tanya explains that Damala also gave him access to her powers, exactly the same way it did with Kanade. He's still surprised by the sudden increase in his magic level, but when Tanya says it shouldn't be a problem for her master, he decides to focus and asks if she can help him master it. Tanya then spends the rest of the day giving him orders while he struggles to adjust to his new power level. Later they return to the city, and while the girls decide to wait outside the guild for Rim, a local girl appears to ask about the day's mission. After they tell about the slimes, she thanks them for all the help because it was her parents' farm they always attack. Everyone continues talking until Rain comes out with the money they earned and ends up having to spend every penny at the buffet both order for dinner. When they finally clean every crumb from their plates, Tanya asks how Rin learned to tame beasts, and Kanade also says she was curious about how he got so good at it. Green then tells about his hometown, where everyone was beast tamers, and how he spent every day training until the entire village was destroyed. It all started like any other day with his parents, who were also beast tamers. Unlike the usual training he'd do with an elder or friend, Rin decided to go to the forest to work on the skills he'd already learned. When he finished the day, it was already sunset, but then he got curious about a bright light shining in the distance and realized it came from his village. He immediately ran back home, but when he got there, it was already too late as everything had been burned. At sunrise the next day, a group of adventurers appeared at the site to rescue him, and one of them helped him find a place to stay. However, he now had to spend nights on the cold floor after long days of brutal work just to keep himself fed. When Ares saw him one afternoon and offered to make him a member of his group, he gladly accepted and thought life was finally about to improve. Unfortunately, he learned the hard way they only heard him as a tool to help make their mission a bit easier. After apologizing for the sad story, Rin tells the girls he long ago accepted his weak and vulnerable nature. But Kanade remembers all the times he fought to protect her and says he always just wanted to protect people from the cruel and difficult life he himself endured. Tanya also admits liking how he's kind and considerate before getting furious with Arios for being so stupid as not to realize they despised the best thing that ever happened to their group. The next day, they set out on a mission to eliminate a group of orcs, and Kanade decides to challenge Tanya to see who can defeat more enemies. After she easily teaches an entire group of them, Ringa reminds them orcs are actually intelligent, but she ignores him and says they're still too stupid to survive against her. Just a few minutes later, she spots one lying next to a rock, and as soon as she approaches to finish him off, he grabs her light until she falls to the ground. She still manages to eliminate him, but a second orc suddenly attacks from behind. Luckily, Rin jumps and is stabbed in the arm before Kanade finishes off the Tanya immediately apologizes for not looking, but Ron tells her not to worry and quickly heals himself. Shortly after that, he hands the crystals to Nadal at the guild before Kanade tells him Tanya suddenly left to be alone. A few moments later, a girl sees her and asks if she had any epic grand eliminations, but noticing her sad mood, she tells her to speak up if something's bothering her and wishes her luck before running off. As soon as she realizes Rin was just looking out for her when he warned her earlier, he appears to talk to her. She then apologizes for hurting him again and promises to listen properly next time, but he starts petting her head and tells her not to worry about something so simple and trivial. After Kanade also catches up to them and hugs her, they return to the hotel and Rana ends up sleeping on the floor so both could enjoy the bed comfortably. This makes Tanya's feelings for him reach new heights and intensities, and after staring at him for a few minutes, she notices a warm and pleasant feeling in her special place, and then she properly covers him to avoid any unwanted temptation. The following afternoon, they easily complete another mission and try to decide between getting more equipment or another buffet when Arios appears with the rest of his former group members. He immediately tells the girls to go a separate way, but Arios stops him and asks why he's being so cold after everything they went through together as a group. Hearing this, the girls ask if he's the hero who fired Ren, and he immediately tries to dismiss them before receiving the shock of his life upon realizing what they really are. When Kanade says they're group members, Arios asks if they also hired him as a slave just like they did, but Kanade gets furious and warns him against disrespecting her master in any way. Everyone struggles to believe what they hear and wonder how pathetic Rian managed to get such powerful and attractive girls to join him. Then he reminds him of a mission they were planning to take to the Lost Forest and explains how difficult it's been to go deep into the forest without having someone to carry all their heavy bags. When he offers to let him join the group again so he can go back to being their humble and glorified bag carrier, Green gets upset and asks how they even expect him to say yes after everything they did to him. After Arios responds by reminding him everyone wants to join the heroes group, Ren then coldly rejects the offer and starts leaving with the girls. But Mina stops him to explain how important and crucial the mission is. When she mentions the Demon King, Ren suddenly gets intrigued and interested. Then she tells him about a special shield hidden by monsters in the depths of the Lost Forest that they need to have any chance against the Demon King. She continues to give him a detailed explanation of the kind of destruction humanity will face if they fail to stop the Demon King. And this makes Rin remember how he felt when his village was burned down. So he reluctantly agrees to help them with the task. They then try to take him back to base, but Kanade stops them and demands a proper apology for the disrespect they showed him. Hearing this, Arios claims he already apologized. Then Tanya takes over and reminds them of the humiliation Rin suffered before telling them to stick their heads in the ground and beg for his forgiveness. At that moment, Arios completely loses his head and says he'll never bow to such a useless and worthless failure. A GAF also claims they did nothing wrong, while Lean and Mina keep saying Rin should be grateful for the opportunity they just gave him. After suddenly grabbing Rian by the collar, Helios tells him to put his little pets under control. And when Rian asks if he really just called the girls his pets, Helios insists and calls them psychopaths for thinking they're better than humans just because they're the supreme and definitive species. He then admits they're attractive, but as soon as he calls Hind a weirdo who loves animals, Ren fractures his face with a brutal punch and warns him against disrespect disrespecting the girls again. Helios then decides to settle scores once and for all with a duel between their groups and unfortunately agrees to it. Moments later, Kanade prepares to fight H and promises to make him apologize to Rin. But he still insults Rin and releases his Megaton sword to display how strong he is. After he expresses enthusiasm for finally fighting one of the supreme species, Kanade advances and delivers a barrage of powerful punches that almost shatter the sword. When she asks if he's too weak to counterattack, he gets furious and energizes his sword for a deadly and precise blow, but she casually kicks it away, leaving him paralyzed in shock. However, after she expresses her disappointment and says she didn't expect him to be so weak, he decides to go all out and apologizes in advance if the attack sends her to the Lord. Hearing this, Kanade starts stretching and decides to use almost half her strength just to respect the fact he's giving it his all. This sends shivers down Agate's spine, while his mind is flooded by overwhelming fear. As soon as he asks why such a powerful person is walking around with Rin, she responds with a flying kick that shatters every blood vessel. While Kanade then realizes she may have used a bit too much power for the bald weakling, Tanya prepares to fight Mina and Lin. The other two, after saying she would have loved to thrash Arios, she offers to go easy on them, since she doesn't usually fight useless and worthless weaklings, but they promise to take her down and begin preparing powerful and devastating spells. As soon as they release the attacks, Daniels cancels with the snap of fingers and both start trying to figure out what kind of trick or gimmick she used. The confused look on their faces makes her start laughing, so they decide to try again, but she does exactly the same thing and explains her ability to cancel any magic spell without exception. Despite this, the resentful losers still make the mistake of thinking they have a chance and prepare for their most powerful attacks yet. This time, Tanya cancels them as soon as they materialize and decides to show them what true and powerful magic is like. Seeing the countless earth spears about to completely crush them, both begin begging for their lives. But Tanya stops at the last moment and reveals it was just an illusion. However, they still passed out due to psychological trauma. Then she tells him to be grateful Rin isn't an evil master, as she would have loved to see what they'd look like after being burned alive. By then, Arios had just started another narcissistic speech about his own greatness and superiority. Then Rin tries to punch him again and says he's tired of hearing any nonsense he has to say. After promising to make him regret his choice of words, Arios attacks with an incredibly fast sword skill and manages to cut his face. Then Rin starts dodging. When Arios tries to mock him for still being too weak to counterattack, Rin realizes he's not really strong for a hero as he should be. So he grabs him by the arm and asks if he has any other tricks to display before delivering an unpleasant body blow that forces him to retreat. Arios immediately resumes his attack and asks Rin how the hell he's dodging them. Then Rin explains how he mastered each of his moves during the time they worked together and demonstrates some of the power he gained from Kanade by delivering a painful kick to the side. He then tells Aros to admit defeat while he still can, but the arrogant idiot decides to go one step further, releasing his powerful lightning magic. After Rin blocks it with Tanya's fireball, Arios decides to overload him with every spell he learned from Lin, without exception. But then Rin suddenly gets distracted right when he advances for the final and decisive blow. Suddenly, Arios' entire body goes numb and senseless. Then Ruino reminds him he can also tame insects before showing him the bee he summoned when they first started the duel. As he prepares to repay him for all the disrespect and humiliation, Arios starts begging and tries to remind him of all the good times they shared together in the past. But after thinking about how they always treated him like trash and worthless, Rin fears a punch that almost obliterates his skull completely. Fortunately, he managed to restrain himself at the last possible second. And after admitting revenge is extremely satisfying and good, the girls run to reunite with him.